The rain fell in heavy torrents, muffling the chaotic noise of the city. A homeless woman, Maria, sat on the cold steps of the train station, her frail hands clutching a small paper bag. Her eyes scanned the hurried faces passing her by, each one indifferent to her existence. At the far end of the station, a young man sat alone, his figure shrouded in mystery. His sharp features carried a familiar air, but his downcast expression told a story of its own. Maria noticed him, a fleeting connection forming in her heart, a shared loneliness in a world that seemed to forget people like them. Something about him seemed different, out of place. He wasn't like the others rushing by, and yet his gaze was distant, as though he carried a burden too heavy for his shoulders. Maria pulled the bag closer, weighing her choices. What she had in her hands was all she owned in the world. But the sight of him, drenched and seemingly lost, stirred something within her. A decision loomed, one that would set an extraordinary chain of events into motion. Maria had once been a promising artist, her days filled with color and her nights brimming with dreams. But life, with its cruel twists, had painted her world in shades of gray. A string of bad decisions, mounting debt, and a betrayal by someone she trusted had left her here, on the streets, clutching a paper bag with her last meal. Yet, even in the face of despair, she held on to her kindness, a flicker of hope burning in her weary soul. Barron, on the other hand, had everything anyone could ever want: wealth, fame, and the Trump name. But beneath the surface, he felt invisible, overshadowed by his family's legacy. He longed for something real, something untethered from expectations and scrutiny. His recent decision to travel alone was a quiet rebellion, a desperate attempt to find himself in a world that only saw his last name. Their lives couldn't have been more different, yet they shared a deep, unspoken loneliness. For Maria, survival was a daily struggle, each moment a test of her will. For Barron, the weight of his family's reputation was suffocating, a gilded cage that held him prisoner. The train station, alive with the sounds of hurried footsteps and the faint hum of an approaching train, became a stage for their stories to collide. The storm outside mirrored the turmoil within them, a foreshadowing of the tempest yet to come. Unbeknownst to Maria, the simple act of sharing her food would unravel secrets that could change everything. And Barron, unaware of who Maria truly was, would soon find himself entangled in a journey that would test the limits of his humanity and redefine his understanding of kindness. The rain subsided, leaving behind a chilling stillness as Maria and Barron's paths intertwined. She handed him the sandwich with a quiet smile, but what began as a simple gesture of kindness became the catalyst for a series of life-altering events. As Barron took his first bite, a passing news broadcast on the station's screen caught Maria's attention. A blurred image of Barron flashed across it, accompanied by headlines about his mysterious disappearance. Her heart sank. Had she just shared her last meal with someone who wasn't what he seemed? Barron noticed her hesitation, his guarded demeanor cracking. He admitted he was traveling incognito to escape his family's relentless spotlight. Maria, wary but empathetic, decided to help him, unaware of the storm brewing behind them. Their brief alliance became fraught with tension as shadows from Barron's life started closing in. Men in dark suits appeared at the station, their sharp eyes scanning the crowd. Barron ducked behind a column, his breath quickening as Maria covered for him. Later, as they found refuge in a dimly lit diner, Maria shared her story. The struggles, the betrayal, the loneliness, all of it spilled out. Barron listened, guilt gnawing at him. He had the means to change her life, but was trapped in his own turmoil. The emotional bond between them deepened, yet cracks began to show. A tense encounter at the diner revealed Maria's growing suspicion. Was Barron truly seeking freedom, or was he running from something darker? The turning point came when Maria discovered a photograph in Barron's pocket, a younger version of himself with someone who looked eerily familiar. The resemblance to a powerful figure from her past was undeniable. Memories of betrayal resurfaced, leaving Maria questioning everything. The city around them seemed to mirror their internal chaos. Streetlights flickered, thunder rolled in the distance, and the cold wind howled. Every step they took felt like they were being watched, every decision weighed down by uncertainty. The trust they had built began to waver as secrets unraveled. Maria's own past resurfaced in ways she never expected, tying her fate to Barron's in a way neither of them could have foreseen. The stakes grew higher, their choices more desperate. By the time they realized the true extent of the forces working against them, it was too late to turn back. The revelation that someone from Barron's family was orchestrating the chaos left them reeling, their bond hanging by a thread as betrayal loomed large. The tension reached its peak, leaving the audience breathless with anticipation. Whispers of betrayal, the weight of unspoken truths, and the looming danger set the stage for an explosive climax that would test the limits of their trust and resolve. The dim light of a rundown motel cast long shadows across the walls as Maria and Barron sat in uneasy silence. The tension in the room was palpable, their fragile bond stretched thin by unspoken fears and lingering doubts. Maria finally broke the silence, confronting Barron about the photograph she had found. Her voice trembled, equal parts anger and sorrow, as she demanded answers. Barron hesitated, his carefully constructed facade crumbling under the weight of her questions. Then, with a heavy sigh, he revealed the truth. The photograph was of his estranged uncle, a man responsible for orchestrating financial schemes that had ruined countless lives, including Maria's. Maria's world tilted. The betrayal she had suffered years ago now had a face, and it was painfully close to the boy she had trusted. Her vision blurred as memories of her downfall resurfaced. The foreclosure of her gallery, the humiliation, the endless nights of hunger and despair. Barron tried to explain, his voice urgent and pleading. He had no part in his uncle's actions, he insisted. He had run away from his family to escape their corruption, not to perpetuate it. But Maria's trust was shattered, her walls rising higher than ever before. The emotional stakes skyrocketed as the two faced off, their pain and anger colliding in a storm of accusations and confessions. Maria's voice broke as she accused Barron of being no different from his family, while Barron's desperation to prove his innocence revealed a vulnerable side he had kept hidden. Suddenly, a loud knock at the door shattered the moment. Barron's blood ran cold as he peeked through the curtain. Men in dark suits stood outside, their expressions cold and unyielding. They had been found. The room plunged into chaos. Barron grabbed Maria's arm, urging her to trust him one last time as they made a frantic escape. The chase through the rain-soaked streets was heart-pounding, the world around them a blur of shadows and neon lights. As they ducked into an alley, Barron finally confessed the full truth. His uncle's men weren't just after him. They were after the secrets he had stolen, proof of his family's crimes. If exposed, it could destroy everything his family had built. Maria's heart raced as she realized the enormity of the situation. The turning point left the audience reeling, their emotions tangled in the characters' turmoil. Maria and Barron, once strangers brought together by chance, were now bound by a shared fight for survival. But the question lingered. Could they trust each other enough to make it out alive? The storm raged on as Maria and Barron found themselves cornered in an abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of the city. The air was thick with tension, every creak of the building amplified by their pounding hearts. The men chasing them were close now, their voices echoing through the empty halls. Maria's chest heaved as she turned to Barron, her voice a mixture of anger and despair. "You lied to me. You knew all along what your family had done to people like me." Barron's face was pale, his eyes pleading. "I didn't know it was you," he whispered, his voice breaking. "If I had known, I would have told you everything from the start. But I can't change what they've done. I can only try to stop them now." Before Maria could respond, the door burst open, and men in suits flooded in, their guns drawn. Barron stepped in front of Maria instinctively, his arms outstretched in a desperate attempt to shield her. "Hand over the drive, Barron," the leader demanded, his tone cold and unrelenting. "No one else has to get hurt." Barron hesitated, his hand clutching the small USB drive that held the evidence capable of bringing his family to its knees. He glanced back at Maria, her eyes wide with fear but resolute. For the first time, he saw the strength she carried, the unbreakable spirit that had survived everything life had thrown at her. In that moment, Barron made his choice. He tossed the drive to Maria, his voice steady despite the chaos. "Run. Take it and expose them." Maria's breath caught, her mind racing as she realized the weight of what he was asking her to do. But there was no time to argue. She grabbed the drive and sprinted toward the back exit, dodging the men who lunged after her. The confrontation erupted into chaos. Barron fought back with everything he had, buying Maria precious seconds to escape. The sound of gunshots echoed through the warehouse, each one a reminder of the danger they were in. As Maria reached the exit, she turned back one last time. Through the haze of dust and chaos, she saw Barron fall to his knees, a defiant smile on his face. "Go!" he shouted, his voice echoing over the chaos. The doors slammed shut behind her as she ran into the stormy night. The USB drive clutched tightly in her hand. Tears streamed down her face as she realized what Barron had sacrificed for her, for the truth. The climax reached its breaking point as Maria disappeared into the darkness, the weight of her mission pressing heavily on her shoulders. Barron's choice had sealed his fate, but his courage had given Maria the chance to change everything. The first rays of dawn broke through the storm clouds as Maria sat on a bench at a quiet park, clutching the USB drive that had cost so much. Her hands trembled, the weight of the past night's events pressing heavily on her chest. The world around her felt eerily calm, a stark contrast to the chaos that had unfolded hours before. In her mind, Barron's final words echoed, the look in his eyes haunting her. He had risked everything to ensure the truth would come to light, and now it was up to her to honor his sacrifice. With newfound determination, Maria reached out to a trusted journalist she had once known during her better days. Within hours, the files were in safe hands, and the first steps toward exposing the corruption were set in motion. News headlines began to spread, revealing the dark secrets of Barron's family to the world. Maria walked through the streets of the city, a quiet strength radiating from her. She had lost so much, but for the first time in years, she felt a spark of hope. The betrayal she had suffered was no longer a weight she carried alone. It was now a weapon for justice. Weeks passed, and life began to settle into a new rhythm. Maria reopened her small art gallery, filling it with pieces that reflected her journey. Every painting told a story of resilience, courage, and redemption. Visitors admired her work, many unaware of the quiet heroism behind each stroke of her brush. One evening, as she was closing the gallery, a letter arrived. The envelope bore no return address, but the handwriting was unmistakable. Inside, a simple note read, "Thank you for believing in me when I couldn't believe in myself. You changed everything. B." Maria's eyes welled with tears. Barron's fate remained uncertain, but the letter was proof that he had survived, at least long enough to send her this message. She smiled, a bittersweet feeling of closure washing over her. As she gazed at the city skyline, Maria reflected on how much had changed. She wasn't the same person who had given her last meal to a stranger at the train station. She had found her strength, her voice, and a purpose greater than herself. The story ended with Maria standing tall, her eyes filled with quiet determination. Though the scars of the past remained, they no longer defined her. Instead, they were a testament to her journey, a journey that would inspire others to rise above their circumstances and fight for what was right. The screen faded to black, leaving the audience with a single thought. Sometimes, the smallest acts of kindness can spark the most extraordinary transformations. As the dust settled on Maria and Barron's story, one thing became clear. Even in the face of betrayal and heartbreak, courage and selflessness can pave the way for redemption. Maria's kindness at the station, a small act of humanity, set off a chain of events that changed not only her life but also exposed a powerful family's corruption. But their journey leaves us with important questions. What would you have done in Maria's place? Could you forgive someone connected to the pain and betrayal you've suffered? Or would the weight of that past keep you from moving forward? And what about Barron? He chose to risk his life for the truth, knowing it might cost him everything. Would you have had the courage to make that sacrifice? How far would you go to right the wrongs of others? This story reminds us that the price of loyalty and redemption is never simple. It asks us to examine our own values. When is it right to stand and fight, even when the odds are against us? And how can we rise above our pain to become something greater? Take a moment to reflect on the power of kindness, resilience, and the strength it takes to do what's right, even when the world seems against you. After all, as Maria and Barron's story shows us, the smallest acts of bravery can lead to extraordinary change. So, what's your story? What would you do if faced with a choice that could change everything? Let us know in the comments. We'd love to hear your thoughts. And remember, the journey of transformation often begins with a single step, a single act of kindness. Will you take that step?